You're listening to the Nourished Child Podcast, episode number 103.
Welcome to the Nourished Child Podcast, a show about childhood nutrition, feeding kids, and dealing with the ups and downs of growing a healthy child. Here's your host, registered dietitian and childhood nutrition expert, Jill Castle.
Today we are talking about body dissatisfaction, particularly in girls. Did you know that body dissatisfaction skyrockets in puberty? And it can compromise a girl's physical and emotional health. Today, I'm speaking with my good friend and my co-author of the book Fearless Feeding, Maryann Jacobsen. She's back on the show to talk about her newest book, My Body's Superpower, The Girl's Guide to Growing Up Healthy During Puberty. So let's get this show started, and we are going to cue that music. Well, hello, friends. Happy day, happy week, happy month. Can you believe it's already February? I can't. I've had my major cold and illness for the year, knock on wood. One of the things I pay attention to, especially as I get older, is making sure I'm getting enough sleep. And I have noticed that when I travel, if I'm not on top of my sleep, I can easily come down with an illness, which is what happened when I returned from a recent trip overseas. It's been a bummer. I was out for a full week and I'm now on the second week, and I just kind of got that tail end chronic cough, which drives my husband crazy, but it is what it is. So if I sound a little bit froggy, that's because I still have this lingering little cough thing going on. But as I was preparing for today's show, I scanned the world of food and nutrition news today, and I saw 3 articles on the topic of toddler milks. One was titled, "The Ominous Rise of Toddler Milk in the Atlantic," and another was entitled, "Should Marketing for Toddler Milks Be Restricted?" And that was in Food Navigator USA. And the third one was titled, "Added Sugars in Toddler Milks and Claims About Unproven Benefits for Young Children Concern Experts." These 3 articles were based on a study that was published yesterday or very recently in the journal Public Health Nutrition by Yoon Choi, Alexis Ludwig, and Jennifer Harris, all from the University of Connecticut, just right up the street from me. They found that as public health organizations have been promoting breastfeeding over the years instead of infant formula, formula manufacturers have invested more of their advertising dollars in toddler milk. The study authors used data from Nielsen to analyze toddler milk and infant formula sales and advertising from 2006 to 2015. They found that the sales of toddler milk more than doubled in the study period from 39 million in 2006 to 92 million in 2015. In the same period of time, TV, print, and online advertising spending for toddler milk increased from less than 5 million annually to more than 20 million annually, while advertising spending for infant formula declined. Quoted, the lead author, Yoon Choi, was quoted as saying, "This study shows how well the marketing for toddler milks works. Using a combination of advertising, retail displays, and lower prices, formula manufacturers were able to increase sales of their own toddler milk brands and at the same time, more than double sales for the entire toddler milk category. This marketing appears to have convinced parents that their children need toddler milks, despite expert advice to the contrary." So, folks, if you haven't listened to episode number 101 of this podcast, I actually had Dr. Jennifer Harris on the show, and she talked about toddler milks, toddler snacks, and the marketing that's happening around those 2 food categories. Very, very interesting podcast episode, and it was very interesting to speak with her. So if you haven't listened to it, head on over to the Nourished Child podcast, episode number 101. So who's got girls going through puberty? And who wants to make sure they grow up and through this phase with a healthy sense of self and body image. If you worry about these things, which I think many of us moms do, and dads too, then this episode is for you. Why? Because I think you'll walk away from this episode with a sense of understanding and purpose and a plan of action for yourself and for your daughter. I'm talking with Maryann Jacobsen today, and we're talking about the topic of girls navigating puberty and coming out on the other side unscathed. And yes, this is possible. Specifically, we're talking about her book, My Body's Superpower. It is a first-of-its-kind book where adolescent girls are empowered to see their body in a positive light. Utilizing a fun and relevant superpower theme, girls learn what is happening inside the body, how to decode and respond to body signals, and what she calls time travel, which they can use when making decisions. My Body's Superpower introduces 9 superpowers based on the research of puberty, nutritional needs, emotional health, sleep, physical activity, intuitive or mindful eating, motivation, media literacy, and body image. If you aren't familiar with Maryann, she is a family nutrition expert and Amazon best-selling author. Through her unique writing style, she helps families develop a healthy relationship with food, utilizing evidence-based strategies. Maryann is the host of the Healthy Family podcast and blogs at MaryannJacobsen.com. Her writing has been featured on WebMD, Huffington Post, Parents.com, Today's Dietitian, The New York Times, and many other online and print publications. She's a sought-after family nutrition expert and has been quoted in various publications, including Parents, Scholastic Parent and Child, and Real Simple, and has been featured on Good Morning America. So let's not wait any longer. Here's my interview with Maryann. Hey, Maryann, welcome to The Nourished Child.
Hi, thanks for having me.
It's nice to have you back on the show. You were on the show, maybe in my first year. I'm pulling my list out here, but we had you on before. And we talked about how to raise a mindful eater. Yeah. Remember that?
I do. Yeah. It doesn't seem that long ago, but probably
I know.
3 years, 2 years?
Yeah, probably 2 years because I've only had this podcast for 3. So I bet it was 2 years ago. But now you have a new book, and that's what we're going to talk about today. My Body's Superpowers for Girls.
Mm-hmm.
And it is a book designed for the middle school age girl to read herself with a trusted adult or alone. And I thought you did a really, really good job with the book in terms of hitting on all the different things that are going on in a young woman's body as she moves through puberty.
Yeah, well, thank you. That was a goal. My daughter was starting puberty, and I learned a lot from you in writing Fearless Feeding. Just felt like there wasn't enough talk about the changes to the body, that more realistically what happened. So that's why I wanted, for girls to read themselves.
Mm-hmm. How difficult was it to write for that audience? I've never written a children's book, and I know you've embarked on this with a couple of your pieces. And how difficult is it to write for that middle school age audience?
It's very difficult, like How to Raise a Mindful Eater. There's a lot of research. I like to make that simple, but I still like to talk about it. But with this, I'm not going to talk about research to a middle schooler. So I had girls read the first draft once I felt good enough about it. And, there's too much information. There's, some positive and negative, but I had to then go, one of the girls recommended, I had them, do you like the title? It was The Amazing Transformation of Me. One of the girls said, My Body's Superpower. And I thought, yes, that's it. That's a way that I can. So I went and rewrote the whole thing, making it much more like, I used a lot of the themes. I don't know, that really just got my creative juices flowing. I think it made the book a little more interesting for that age group. So. Yeah,
because you use the model of a superhero throughout the whole book.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about it, body dissatisfaction, goes up during puberty and the body's changing. And I thought, what a great way to talk about these changes as not bad, but actually superpowers that, of course, girls have to learn. They're not something, most of them need a little bit of practice. Some of them have already learned it, hopefully through, parenting practices and feeding. So, the feelings they have these major intense feelings. Yeah, that can be, not so much fun, but we can use those feelings. They are superpowers. We just kind of have to learn how to manage them. And so, yeah.
Yeah. So take us through, you divide the book into 3 different categories, and it's a book about girls going through puberty. So obviously there's going to be the physical changes, but you dive deeper. You don't just stick to growth and development and, Tanner stages. Help the listeners understand how you approached the book, how you divided it out, and what sort of each section talks about.
Well, the research it's interesting because there's the research on body image, and there's also the health and nutrition needs, which go up. There's the motivation, the research. How do we motivate kids to take care of their body, to engage in healthy habits? So I kind of combined media literacy, combined all this research. So it's really, an ultimate health book for girls. And so I separated out into the physical. So that includes, what their bodies are going through, the, what I call super functioning nutrition, appetite signals, listening to their body's hunger and fullness because they're very hungry. They have to learn how to manage that. And super focus, which is exercise and sleep. And then there's the emotional powers, which is the internal compass, which is their feelings that are helping direct them. It's also friendships, which are very important to, their health and well-being, and very supportive relationships help body image. And super you, like a strong sense of self. They're figuring out who they are. They're in those beginning stages. So taking time to figure out what they like. Girls in particular always want to please. So it's easy for them to get the good grades to please their parents or look a certain way so they're popular. So it gets them thinking internally on what I call inside goals. What's important to you? And yes, those outside goals, they'll never go away, but those inside goals are what really keep you happy and develop who you are and figuring it out. And then the outside powers really can trip up. They can do this work. Anyone can do this work. And then they go in the real world, they're on social media. They get these messages. They see, these unrealistic images. They see advertising. And they also maybe, if they're bigger, they may get teased, or even a coach may say, lose weight. So they need to be able to learn how to deal with this, our real world that often has different ideas of health than is helpful. So that's what the outside power is all about. Critical thinking. No girl should consume media passively. They should always be critically thinking about what they're receiving, what they're reading. It's harder to be a parent today. So this book, it's not just for the girls. The parents can read through it and covering, I know I cover this with my daughter, all these topics. So the book is really, there's a journal to go along with it so they practice, but it's really the conversations, reading it with your daughter, talking about these, I've had parents come and tell me, wow, this has really helped me cover so much more than I would have during this, really important time that they're changing and developing beliefs about themselves. And so.
Yeah. As I looked at it, I thought, I know that a lot of parents will have their eyes open to just the many different topics that you can talk to your daughter about in terms of this transition. We think puberty and we think, oh, they're going to start their period and they're going to reach their full adult height, but there's so much more going on. And I think you did a really good job of outlining all the different, topics from, not just the physical, but the emotional feelings thing I thought was great. And we'll talk about that in a little bit because I want you to sort of summarize some of that for the listeners. But the outside powers too. We know, the media, even, oh gosh, when I was looking at it, I thought 10 years ago or whatever, was it 10 years ago? No, 7 years ago when we wrote Fearless Feeding, the whole media thing was so different then. The social media wasn't that big of a deal for kids. It was TV. and phones, but really not even phones. It was TV. And that was where the research was. Now we have social media and it's very difficult. When you were writing the book, of course, you have a daughter who is sort of your target market age. How much did she influence it? And what did she think about the process? And even just the fact that you were writing it?
She's my biggest, my motivation behind the book, because I wanted to help her, make sure I was doing all I could do. And she was really positive. I mean, sometimes she doesn't want me, don't talk about the book, Mom, I'm like, I'm not. But yeah, I think going through it, and that's just the way I am when I write, usually, not always, but I'm kind of going through it as well. So I have a kind of passion for getting answers because I want the answers too. So going it through with her really helped me. I used so much information with her that I wouldn't have if I didn't write this book. So, she's even told me, especially lately, she's thanked me. She's like, gosh, Mom, if I didn't know how my body was changing, like, she's thanked me like a few times for, how much detail, because I think the physical changes and girls gain fat and they're out of proportion versus fat. They don't grow like proportionally all the way through puberty. And, all girls are different, but quite a few will, they gain fat to prepare for their period. So this is scary to them. They're gaining as much as 15 to 20 pounds a year, where before it was like 5 pounds a year. So this is and a lot of it's normal. I mean, of course, growth can go too fast, and we kind of got to watch out for that. The appetite signals, doing all these things to, listen to our body to help it grow right. But, girls don't really, it's just barely brushed. It's talked about a little bit. I've seen it in books, but when we went to that talk about getting your period, she said the waist gets smaller. And it's like, what? Actually, first, a lot of times they gain extra fat. And later, the waist may go smaller once it redistributes, but not in everybody. So I just felt like, we're not talking enough about this. And they're seeing the images, and they're already really sensitive socially to being accepted. So, I think I got off track there, but
No,
yeah.
This is good. This is good. No, I agree. And I think there is a lot of misinformation out there. It's sort of mysterious. Part of that is because nobody feels comfortable about talking about the physical changes. I remember when I was a really young mom that one of the things, because I was a healthcare provider, one of the things was I wanted to call a penis and a vagina, and breasts. And not everybody, not all my friends were comfortable talking about the physical parts of the body in that manner. And so I think that is, part of why we don't talk about this stuff. It's difficult, talking about fat and body weight and weight gain around the middle. I get a lot of parents who ask me about that as well, and they think it's abnormal. And I feel like I'm always saying, no, it's perfectly normal for the age of your child. But then talking about how the other parts, the lady parts change and the boy parts change, we all get a little bit like, oh, it's not proper. We shouldn't be talking about that. And so we clam up. And I can see why that can be super challenging for parents to talk to their kids about. So how did you sort of lay that out? Let the audience know. Did you come straight at those topics? Did you change the names of all the, your flour and your...
No, I use the real word. My book is it's not as much about like the sexual changes, even though it does talk about like vagina and breast. Point of the book, it's more about the physical as far as, muscle and fat and feelings and how you feel about your body, how you relate to your body, but not so much talks a little about when you might get your period, but it doesn't go, I feel like there's already a lot. I think there's that one book, What's Happening in My Body, is a really good one. So I didn't really, and that's not my expertise. But I think it is important to use real terms, I don't know what your friends used for breast. I mean,
boobies.
Yeah. I had a friend like that. But, here's the thing. If they don't hear it from us, they're going to hear it from a friend. And so, I had a comment one time about, it's giving them ideas about their body image. Because I talk about, you may not like it, but, let's say we have a girl and she has no unhealthy body image. That doesn't mean, though, and the research shows that the absence of a negative body image does not mean they have a positive body image. So positive body image over the last 10 years is more about acceptance, body appreciation, being in tune with your body and what it's feeling, and also it's important that they know that a lot of women and men too, or girls and boys or adolescents, don't like their body because sooner or later they're going to come encounter with a friend that's saying I'm fat, and this friend may be smaller than them. So in some ways it's preparing them, saying, look, it's great, but you need to know that not all girls like their body, and this is why. And then when we talk about media literacy, so you're kind of you're giving them these tools. So when they encounter the real world, they're kind of ready. I know for me, I had a friend that, didn't like her body and talked about it. I wasn't even there. So it influenced me, and it would have been nice if I was kind of prepared and knew that can happen. And so, yeah, I think I'm a realist and I like to prepare as much as possible.
Yeah, I think that's good. I remember when I was in 9th grade and that was back in the day where in junior high, you had to weigh in for gym class. They would do like this, physical assessment. We all had to weigh in, and everybody was like 105, 102, 110. And I was 90 pounds. And everybody stared at me. And I had no basis for, I was so not prepared for that, but no basis for understanding. I hadn't started to develop yet, obviously, and everybody else had. And it was just a really awkward moment, and a moment that I, have remembered over the years. And so the preparation for all the different things that can happen, situations you can get into, feelings that can result from those situations. One of the things, though, I do want to dig a little deeper into is this idea of weight gain. And in the book, you hone in on the word fat. And I'd like you to maybe suggest how listeners might discuss weight and fat with their daughters, because that's what I'm hearing a lot from, my social circles and my clients, this inability or feeling lost around how do I talk about it without causing a problem, doing damage.
Yeah, I think, fat is just a normal, I could say adipose tissue. Our body's made up of fat, lean body mass, bone, we have organs. So fat is an important part of our body. So it's kind of staying factual. But I think most kids, if they're, middle school, sometimes they're called fat, and that's not a positive descriptor. But, body fat is the body's way, a girl's body, as, the first 2.5 years or so, she gains body fat to prepare for her period. And you need a certain amount of body fat to get your period. If you don't have enough, and sometimes that can happen in athletics and they're not eating enough or they're over-exercising, that's not good for them or their bones. If they don't get their period, when they're supposed to, their bones suffer. So it's a healthy part of our body. And, society may, if too much fat is bad, then all fat, it's this extreme. So they just need to know that's part of it. You're going to continue to grow. Girls, puberty tends to last around 4 years for girls, sometimes shorter, sometimes longer. A lot of them are done growing by 15, 16. And so this is just a natural part of our body. We shouldn't be afraid to talk about it. At midlife too, again, we go through changes in how our bodies distribute fat. So it's important to know about that and to try and do what we can to keep our body healthy without going to extremes. So yeah, I think it's staying factual, positive, and just being open to whatever they say back. So you want to make sure that they understand, they can ask any questions. They need to feel like they can say anything, and you'll be okay with it.
This episode is brought to you by Nutrition Prep School, a place for parents to learn how to feed and nourish their kids through self-paced educational programs focused on kids of all ages. From babies and picky eaters to athletes and kids with ADHD, Nutrition Prep School has online programs, e-guides, and books to help you feed and nourish your child better. Feeding kids is one of the hardest jobs of being a parent, and I know it's not easy to raise healthy eaters without some basic knowledge about nutrition and some expert tips and guidance. That's why I created Nutrition Prep School. Check it out over at www.nutritionprepschool.com. Does it strike you that puberty and menopause are kind of mirrors of each other?
Well, there's an old study about the most symptoms during puberty that you have, like mood swings and just in general, like the most intense symptoms are puberty and perimenopause. So it's that transition, and they're about 4 years each. So yeah, it's kind of in reverse. So what's happening in puberty is, there's estrogen and it's unopposed. They're not ovulating yet. And they don't really regularly ovulate till years after they get their period. Some months they will. So the hormones aren't totally in balance yet. And that same thing happens in perimenopause. You maybe don't ovulate some months. And so, when your hormones aren't in balance, that does affect your brain and your moods. And it puts you at risk for anxiety and depression. So these are all things we need to be aware of. If we're aware of it, we can get help and do something before it gets worse. And sometimes it can improve, especially once the hormones get more in balance. It's definitely interesting. What I think we need more of is, self-care, just really taking the time for ourselves and taking care of ourselves and listening to what our body needs. Just think it's really important to tune in.
And slowing down a little bit. That's one of my mottos for 2020 is just slow down and enjoy the work that you're doing. Like put the time and effort and the quality into it, not just run and fast from one thing to the next. Just to slow down and enjoy what you're doing. In the book, it wouldn't be a book by a dietitian unless it had some nutrition advice for young girls. And you pretty much summarize that in an acronym called SUPER, SUPER. Can you give the listeners just a heads up on what that stands for?
Yeah. Before I talk about SUPER, I go through all the body systems and talk about kind of nutrition and how it can affect how they feel, even their bowel movements. I know that. But it's really important for them to realize, make this connection. And the research is showing that when we realize that nutrition improves our functioning and our feeling, and, that's much more motivational for someone to make healthy choices and to just do it because I'm supposed to, or definitely for their weight, that's not motivating. So, I go through the systems and then talk about this is a pattern of food, that these aren't strict rules, because we know at this age they can take it and be like, I have to do this. And so it's really, S is stick with fruits and vegetables, most meals, just include them where you can. Up the amount of calcium, especially bone health is so important during this phase. Pick whole grains about half the time. Eat fats too, especially plant fats, that, nuts that have minerals that girls are really low on. And then R is for realize the power of protein. So yeah, it's just hopefully, just some reminders. They're becoming more independent and they're going to be making choices. Mm-hmm. So
yeah, super simple, easy for them to remember. You also dive into the feelings. I thought you did a really good job on this. And I think it's an area where it's nice to see it be brought into the nutrition arena. And I'll link up. I did an interview on eating and emotions, which I really enjoyed doing because it was really insightful and helpful. And I thought super helpful for parents who, are trying to understand maybe their own feelings, but the feelings of their children around eating. You dive into feelings that just can crop up with all these changes during puberty and explain them. Can you give us just a little taste of what you included there in terms of some of the feelings that are pretty typical and what girls can learn in terms of the language and how to process through them?
So, yeah, I think it's really important, especially when girls have all these feelings, that they understand kind of it's like a roller coaster. Some are great, they're joy and happiness and they feel good. Other ones like embarrassment, anxiety. There's a lot of anxiety. Uncertainty is a tough one. I got a lot of advice from Karen Koenig, who wrote the Food and Feelings Handbook, and she deals a lot with dysregulated eaters. And her book is just it talks about, different feelings, and many that I included that tend to be more common with dysregulated eaters. But the idea is that we welcome these feelings, we put a name to them, And then we kind of ask ourselves, what is this trying to tell me? So, sometimes we need to make a change. If we're feeling a friend is not reliable and we're disappointed and we label that, maybe it's time to step back from the friendship. That doesn't mean we have to give up that friend. And maybe we need to make some other friends. Okay. So the problem is if we just avoid these emotions, then we get into that avoidance. I think what Melanie Smith talks about. And this can be unhealthy. It could be just being on our computer, Instagram all day. It could be eating or spending or whatever. But it could be things that look good, like being perfect, getting straight A's, overvaluing our appearance. All these things we think, wow, she's getting straight A's. She's in all these activities. And then it's like, oh no, she's really trying to avoid, these difficult feelings. So it's not fun for anyone. We all go through them at midlife. I know, I'm going through it. There's difficult emotions, but underneath that is change, it's trying to tell me something. And we don't often look at it that way. And what better time when these emotions are so loud to teach girls?
What a good time to teach the girls to recognize the emotions, put a name on the emotion. I think that's half the battle sometimes. It's just putting a name on the emotion. You're feeling worried, you're feeling angry, but then how to process it. And I agree. I think you and I actually, because it was Melanie Smith who I interviewed for the Eating and Emotions podcast episode, but weren't you and I together when we watched her speak live?
Yeah.
It was so good, wasn't it? And I think, I work with teenagers and kids, but particularly teenagers. I am very aware that there are difficult emotions oftentimes that are not being talked about, addressed, or even acknowledged. And it just feeds the fire of anxiety and depression. And then you have parents who are looking at their kids. Well, she participates in all of these activities. She gets great grades. She has tons of friends. She's fully functioning, but she's losing weight or she's gaining weight or she's not sleeping at night, can't sleep. I mean, there's just, to me, it is part of the picture and needs to be included in, I guess, our parenting education.
Yeah, there's the emotion coaching that I'm forgetting his name. A psychologist, found research that kids that got more emotion coaching do better, are healthier. They're, it's just basically regulating your emotions. And that's also tied to body image. If you have a harder time with your emotions, again, you may, like I said, overvalue appearance or turn to food. And everyone's so different in how they handle it. And I think a problem too is a lot of times up until puberty, parenting is more of a punishment consequence. So I think sometimes kids are afraid they're going to get in trouble. So maybe it's a good time to tell them, hey, look, you're not going to get in trouble. Or just spending time. I wrote an article, what a middle school girl needs from her mom, and talk about what I call like the roller coaster ride of puberty. And really, it's getting on the roller coaster with your daughter or son, but it focuses on girls. And, you have to spend time with them. You have to listen. You have to just watch out for being too judgmental when they come to you, because sometimes you're like, you should have more confidence. Because they all are a lot more. And so then they don't want to go, to their parents. So start with spending more time, regular just with them. And hopefully they'll start talking or watching shows. I found really helpful to have a show that you watch with your daughter. And then it just brings up so many conversations. We actually watched Glee together. It's for high school kids, but oh my gosh, we talked about so many different things from that. Examples. And the Fosters. Yeah, the Fosters. Make sure you watch it first. And every parent's different. But I find that's really helpful to get talking about all these different things and to being able to see people on screen make mistakes. Like, yeah, probably not a good idea to not tell your parent.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's just more than I thought, the emotional changes. They're letting go of their childhood and it's really tough on them. I think when kids are little, they kind of do what the parents like. You set the stage, but then later, as they reach this point, adolescence, you need to start taking interest in what they're interested in. understanding that, yeah, they're kind of sometimes have a bad attitude, but there's a reason for it. And,
Yeah. My girls are young adults now, but I'm experiencing something similar in that they're letting go of their dependence.
mm-hmm.
And even though they want independence like there's no tomorrow, it also means they're letting go of their dependence. And that's hard, having somebody to fall back on who pays the bills, who cooks the meals, who does the laundry or helps out with things like that. And realizing that that's not something that they have anymore. My older one is living on her own now. And that's what I'm hearing a lot from her is like, I miss just having somebody else to take over some of this stuff. Now I have to do it all. I mean, there's similar, different focuses, different sort of complaints and stuff, but there's that movement towards independence, and it's sort of step by step in different stages. Before we wrap up, I do want to talk about your critical thinking chapter, where you do talk about social media and the news and just those outside influences. And you go through helping girls understand social media. What do you think are some of the most important things that girls need to know about social media?
Well, I think, I talk about it, the virtual world is different than the real world. So they need to know when they're in the virtual world, this isn't real. This is not, people post pictures of their best moments. We all know that. And you have to remind yourself of that. And it's not the same. It never replaces face-to-face contact and in person, seeing your friends. Girls are spending a huge amount of time on social media. And it is, has been linked with more depression and poor body image. It does depend on who they follow, though, too. So you want to know who, if your daughter has social media, what is she following? Like, who is she following? Because that can make a big difference if they're appearance-based. But they need to know. Yeah, exactly. So, my daughter doesn't have it yet. She goes on mine. So we're kind of in this, she's 13. I'm really, I'm not one to keep, I usually like to help teach. But I know I see that hours and hours, they have to create their own limits to how much time they want to spend on social media, because they have to realize how it may not be the best for them. I mean, it's all about use and misuse. You don't want them to misuse it. Social media can be great for, especially if they have relatives or friends out of town. But it's really reminding yourself when you're on that, you might see the picture, you weren't invited to a party. And it's reminding yourself, well, maybe she could only invite a few people. In the past, we would never know. Maybe we'd hear about the party later, but we all go through that, right? They all got together and they didn't call me.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's just, what is it? Screenagers. She's got a lot of good Tech Talk Tuesday, like at the dinner table. Maybe, you bring up a topic about technology, and it can be social media. It could be text, what you put out there, right? It's so important. I mean, that's advertising, understanding the nature of advertising. And because we're seeing that on social media too, right? So yeah, I think it's just really helping them, like with all of this, it's preparing them. Don't wait for the problem to happen. Help them realize, like, this is why social media can be great, but it also can make you feel bad. And this person's life is just a little sliver of their life. And they're just like anybody else. They have problems, but they're not. I mean, some people bring their problems on social media. That's a whole other problem. But so
that's a problem.
Yeah. So, I'm really, we've kind of held off. And also, sometimes girls, when they're in a social situation, they need to put their phone away and not just be on their phone, and I see that a lot. And it's, again, it's like, there's a time and place for that. Maybe check it a couple times a day or,
I think it impacts their ability to connect in real time.
Yeah.
Live and in the present. And I see that in, my kids' friends, and even just, moving through adult-like relationships. Those are hard anyways if we didn't have social media in the picture. And they become even harder when the basis of your, new relationship or new friendship was struck up through social media platforms or connecting online. So it's a challenge. And I also think what struck me as you were talking is, I myself feel ambivalent about social media. And I think as a parent, you need to think about how you feel for yourself and your own interaction with social media, and then how you want that to play out with your child. And sometimes we're not even thinking about how we use social media. We're on all the time, or we're making comments, or we're nasty. We're nasty on social media. And I think that, if you're raising kids who are using lots of social media too, it's just helpful for everybody to be sort of very clear about the purpose and the use and function of it.
Yeah. And then when you write a comment, sometimes you don't mean it to be mean, but it's different. Like, that's never the place to have a conversation. It's really just keep in touch. But yeah, I think it's hard for everyone. We're all figuring out this technology, and adults have problems too. And so.
Mm-hmm. So My Body's Superpowers, great book. You've covered a lot, and there's even more, folks, way more than what we're covering here in the interview. So I encourage you to go to Amazon and purchase this book. It's in print and Kindle, and also has a companion journal with it. Maryann, if you think about, what you want girls to know who are going through puberty, what if you could drill it down to one or two things, what is it that you want them to know?
I want them to know there's a reason for all these changes, and their body, if they take care of it, their body will do amazing things for them, and that there's only one unique them, and that they need to go out to the world and be themselves. So that's these changes, while they can be hard, and they're not hard for everyone. I think it just depends, every, adolescent is different, but practicing these superpowers, realizing all the things their body can do to help them and being themselves, I think just really sets the stage as they move on to kind of the next, a lot of them going into high school and then college. It can help prevent a lot of potential problems, setting this during this really kind of sensitive time. If you have a daughter at this age, it's a sensitive time. I hate the thought of them when they don't have this information thinking, oh, this is bad, I'm hungry, and I got some advice in there. And one of the moms wrote in that, like, she thought hunger was bad because, she was gaining weight and she was hungry and she felt like this was bad. It's not bad. You're growing. If we treat our body right, we'll be, happier and healthier.
Mm-hmm. What would you want moms and dads to know?
I want moms and dads to know that their child needs them more than ever during this phase, even when they don't act like it. They really need their parents, and they need understanding, but also to set boundaries. If, a daughter's talking to you in a way that you don't like, you don't have to take it. You can be like, I don't like the way you're talking to me. Let's, take a break. And so I think that's important, that you don't have to just take if they're really, you can help, say, look, I think you're upset right now. Let's wait for you to calm down. But yeah, that they really do need their parents a lot. And I think it's hard because I think parents want to be involved, but yet they feel like their daughter is pulling away. So then again, it's just, spending that time with them. And also the body image is really tied to their health, and how they relate to their body is more important. I think we tend to think of body, I don't even like that term body image, but, if they can learn to relate to their body in healthy ways, they're going to be healthier. We tend to be more like, eat healthy, do this, do that. But if they can relate to their body in a healthy way, that's half the battle. And I don't think that's really understood so much. So,
yeah. Well, you did a great job with the book, Maryann. It's very thorough, as per your norm. Mm-hmm. Everybody go out and go to Amazon and check out this book, but also look at Maryann's other books. And of course, I'll plug Fearless Feeding, the book that we wrote together, which was updated early last year. But more importantly, what's on the horizon for you?
Well, I do want to do a book for boys, which isn't, more than half done. I'd have to do some additional research, and my son's not quite there yet either, but I just turned 50. So not just actually, more than 6 months ago, but
I think I was there for that, wasn't I?
What timing, right? So I'm
going to be there for your 51st too, probably.
Well, my next book will be 80. No, just kidding. But so I'm doing a book on midlife for midlife women, and again, it's like this developmental period. There's so many changes. I like to research anyway, and so I'm kind of jumping and doing this book next, and it's proving to be the most intense. But yeah, so I'm doing midlife, but I blog, and I have my podcast, usually monthly, the Healthy Family Podcast. I'm going to be this year, 2020, a lot of experts I'm lining up on the midlife health. So have that focus. But on my blog, I still talk about all the ages and stages, when people sign up. So I really believe in these developmental periods, are vulnerable times, but they're also great times to maybe make some changes, learn about how the body's changing and the mind's changing. And we're not static. Kids definitely are, but even adults, so.
All good stuff. Yeah, all good stuff. I'll include your website and the Amazon links and your blog link, your podcast link, all in the show notes. Everybody, this will be available on joelcastle.com and on iTunes. And I hope that you go check out Maryann's site. It's MaryannJacobsen.com, Jacobsen with an E on the end, or S-E-N rather. And Maryann, thank you so much for coming back on the show. It's always, always, always fun to catch up with you. And I'm sure we'll do some more catching up after we log off.
Yeah. Thanks, Jill. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. So everyone, I hope you enjoyed listening to Maryann talk about girls, puberty, and what they can do to stay informed and empowered through this inevitable phase of childhood. Be sure to check out her book on Amazon and check out that companion journal as well. As a reminder, again, it's written for girls to read, but it also is written for parents to read as well. Thanks again for tuning in to this show. If you want to make sure you don't miss an episode, be sure to subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts or on one of your favorite Android apps. You can also rate and review the show there. I'm super excited about my next episode. I'm digging deep and sharing some of my mom wisdom around starting solids. Specifically, I'll be talking about 3 different ways to start solids for babies and the pros, the cons, and the research around each method. I sure hope you'll tune in. Thanks for joining me today. While I can't see your face or hear your voice, I imagine you driving your car, taking a walk, or doing the dishes. I appreciate the fact that you take the time to listen, and I hope you find value in each episode, even if it doesn't pertain to your stage in parenthood right now. Each stage of childhood informs the next. So whether you're listening to anticipate what's going to happen or reflecting back on what did happen, you are helping yourself and your child by listening. Be sure to give that child in your life a loving squeeze today. And don't forget, pat yourself on the back while you're at it. Bye for now.
Thanks for listening to the Nourished Child Podcast, where the #1 goal is to help you grow a nourished child inside and out.